When we deal with work, it means that problems will arise sooner or later. And it's not relevant if you call them problems or challenges or anything else you might name, situations, issues. You want to have them solved and you want to be sure that someone takes care of them. However, sometimes you think that some people might have a good view on them. Some people, however, seem to be either unable or unwilling to deal with these issues or problems or situations, or however you want to call them. So what does that mean and how do you actually deal with them? How are you able to deal with people who, in your opinion, are not able to address problems properly? Very important here is we have to look at the problem first before we look at the different phases of how a problem consciousness or a problem awareness might happen and how you can influence it. Because the problem always is that leaders have wrong assumptions about how the issue, how the problem is perceived on the other side. And often people make statements, especially leaders make statements where they say, well, problem consciousness or problem awareness is something that only leaders have. And that, of course, is plain wrong. Even worse is when someone says, oh, you only have it when you have a certain level of education. That is plain wrong as well. Of course, it might help you to have a certain level of education to deal with the issue or with the problem or the situation. However, seeing that there is a problem is not connected to a certain level of education. Also, we have seen many different times where obviously there was a problem and leaders were the one who ignored it deliberately. So often people, and especially leaders, tell others that they, as leaders, know how to deal with problems, but anyone else does not. And that, of course, is part of exactly the problem and the problematic situation. Now, of course, we have to talk about the different phases of a problem consciousness or problem awareness, as I prefer to call it. There's a 5-stage model how people can perceive problems, issues, or situations. Let's start with level one. Level one means that the employee or the person you're talking with, it is not relevant if it's a leader or an employee because the problem exists on both sides of the game. You talk to a certain person, the person says, I do not see the problem. And the main point here is often that this is due to a lack of leadership in the first place. So either you were unable to deliver situative leadership, or you were unable to know the difference between transactional and transformational leadership, or you're unaware of more modern concepts, for example, Ronald Heifetz's adaptive leadership, technical leadership. Often it's a failure of leadership, so people simply gave up. And this is not a conscious step. People do not say, hey, today at work, I will give up on leadership. It is simply that people see that they address an issue and often nothing happens. Or even worse, they address an issue and as a thank you note, they have the problem on their desk and now have even more work to do compared to what they already had to do. And then, of course, people will say, that is probably nothing I want to see. So when people do not see a problem, it is not a conscious step that they are deliberately ignorant. They simply gave up on the whole matter way earlier. And that is a part of leadership failure, not of employee failure. Of course, there are always some people who are not addressed or who cannot be addressed by facts, but we get to that later when people deliberately act in a way where you also then as a leader can say, I give up on that person, but that is something which we will do in a later phase, not at the very beginning. Never face someone and think they are unable to deal with an issue. People have an interest to have a good atmosphere at work. People have an interest to work with colleagues who are competent. People also have an interest to work properly and to get things done. And that includes that the problems will be solved. So when they don't see a problem, either it has never been addressed, which rarely is the case, or they gave up before. So be sure that you check on leadership before you blame the people who work for you. If you now address it properly and people might see, okay, there is a chance. So maybe you join an organization and you say, okay, there's a new leader and maybe this person really wants to change something here. So I might address the issue. So you move on from phase one to phase number two, where the person you're talking to sees a problem, but it's a minor problem. It's a small problem. We don't have to deal with this. This is going to solve itself. Or if we just wait long enough, nothing's going to happen anyway. So now you have to, of course, stress the importance. You have to say why it is important. And also you have to say why it is important for them. Also, you have to show what is the support. And I'm not talking about support where you say, oh, we support you wherever we can. Of course, not with more resources, not more people or more time or more money, but we support you wherever we can, which means I just say it and don't do anything afterwards. You shouldn't be surprised that people are not motivated by these kind statement. So you really have to show how do you support them and where do you support them, because people will always say it's a small problem only to get rid of the situation, and especially to be sure that it does not add up on their desk. So phase number 2 can be overcome by proper leadership support. Still, it does not mean that the situation now is solved, because phase number 3 means that the employee or the person sees a problem, but the person says that the problem cannot be changed whatsoever. And that often is accompanied by a certain number of phrases which you might have heard in the past. So, for example, when people say, yeah, I think we should do something there, but the market isn't quite ready yet, or this does not fit to our clients or customers, or this doesn't fit to our team or to our culture. It is something which normally is a statement that is very bland. It cannot be falsified. There is no reasoning and there are no facts behind it. People simply want to say, yeah, there is a problem. It's an important one, but we can't change it anyway, which of course has the big advantage. You don't have to deal with it, or at least you think you don't have to deal with it. And of course, it is never a situation, it is never a proper solution that when others, especially others on the market who are competitors of yours, others act on it and you do not. So it is now very important that you show people, for example, benchmarking. What do other people do? What is your market research? What is proper evidence? And by the way, if you now have someone who even cannot be influenced by facts, then you might have to make a hard decision. The hard decision can be that you decide to give the problem to someone else, or that you talk to someone else, but it can also be that you say, well, maybe it's the wrong person for the job. And then you have to simply say, we make a tough decision here to have the problem solved by someone else in the future. So that is phase number 3. Phase number 4, then, when you have someone who now looks at the facts and says, okay, I see a problem. It's not a minor problem. It is not a problem that cannot be changed. We can change it. And now, of course, you might assume that they say, okay, I'm going to act on it. No, phase number 4 says, I see a problem. It's not a minor one. Yes, it can be changed, but not by me. It can only be solved by someone else. And often then people name roles and people who are far, far away from them. This can only be solved by the leadership board, the board of directors, or they refer to the ivory tower, to headquarters. They do what they want anyway. These people from above, we are just here. We can't change anything. So we are in phase 4 out of 5, and we still struggle to get things done. Very important here is that you have to address what Jeffrey Gitomer in the US often addresses as what's in it for me, abbreviated WEFM. So when someone says, I'm going to deal with this problem, so probably you know the fact that sometimes shoot the messenger syndrome is in practice in certain corporations. So when you come up with a bad news, you are the one who has the problem at the end. So what's in it for me except having a bunch of problems afterwards? So you have to tell the employee, the person you're talking to, what is in for them. What is the proper advantage? And by the way, when you tell them, oh, do it for the greater good, or do it for the best for the organization, this might work when you're a charity, or when you are a social enterprise, social organization, where people have a very different motivation anyway in the first place when they work for you. When you are in the for-profit field, you have to offer a for-profit result for the person dealing with the problem. That is WEFM as it should be. And that is your job to find out what is in for them. And when you say, well, there's nothing in for them, then please expect that they're not going to help you. Because as soon as they see that something's in for them, then they move on to phase number 5. And that means they see a problem and they're going to act on it. That is the last phase, phase number 5. So we see 4 out of 5 phases are basically struggling and going through different phases of how to deal with a person not accepting that there is a problem, or it can't be changed, or it can't be changed by them, or it's a minor problem, etc., etc. It is your job to convince them that they deal with the issue. Of course, there's more on this. When you go to expert.nb-networks.com, just put your email address in there. Once per week, you receive an email with everything I publish on all the different platforms. I receive an email every week, or a couple of emails every week, where people say, I found your content, but it's behind a paywall. Yes, that's because other people, of course, publish my content as well, but they want to make money with it because they paid me as an author. You get free access via the email you receive every Wednesday morning, expert.nb-networks.com, and then you can get access to absolutely everything. Of course, when you now say, hey, I have very specific questions, can we just have a chat? Of course, nb@nb-networks.com. Just go there and drop me an email, and then we're going to have a chat. Very happy to do that. And if you have something very specific where you say, hey, we need someone for training, speaking, coaching, or consulting, we have a mentoring project or project interim management is needed, or we have an event coming up, can you host it? Can you be the MC, or can you speak there? Of course I can. But if you just have questions and want to have a chat about it, let's do that first. nb@nb-networks.com. Looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much for the amazing emails of the last couple of weeks. We had great discussions here. Thank you very much for that. But the most important part now is to apply what you heard in this episode of the Leadership Podcast, because only when you apply what you heard, you will see the change in your organization that you want to see happening. And I wish you all the best doing so. Of course, I'm always happy to help you implementing the ideas you just heard. And now wishing you all the best implementing the ideas in your organization with the activities that you plan from it. And at the end of this podcast, there's only one thing for me left to say. Thank you very much for your time.